Yeah. Okay. Iyoba, a John way. I have a one matter show that I was even supposed to discuss with you if you're online. No kind Madiba, you know, no kind Madiba. But I think I have one kind later. Yeah. I'll go on kind later. Anyway, good evening to all of you. Waya Bota, Adomo. It's not a very good evening for me. A Liverpool be magbe wakota na. Mine my way ayo. I don't know what we did to them. Magbe. I don't know what we did to them. So, but but the sign we God have the absolute power. God have the absolute power. So today we're going to be speaking about a very interesting topic, Benin historical evolution. The reason I want to talk about this topic is because of an argument I had with a friend. Not an argument though, we're talking. That my friend wanted to know. I think we were talking. It regards the Iyoba, basically the creation of the Iyoba title. It is more or less. I want us to get to understand some of these things from some very perspective that probably some of us might never actually have envisaged. We're going to be looking at it from one aspect of. It's not really a very tight angle though, but I want to present some intellectual argument that concerns how as a people that we have evolved, and how the evolution of our people has led us to that has sort of shaded us from European influences. Okay, so it's particularly very interesting because we want to be talking about using the Iyoba as a case study. Okay, I think that's it. Let's look at the Benin historical evolution using Iyoba as a case study. using Iyoba as a case study. Before we talk about that history, a lot of persons I've had countless of calls since yesterday. A lot of persons have been calling and saying that Izoduwa it's not Amowie marriage. I've not done any marriage. It was just an introduction that looked like one traditional marriage. Me myself, I didn't plan for that. I just took a couple of friends and a couple of my families. We traveled to Ilefe. She's not from Ilefe. Anyway, so we traveled to Ilefe just to get introduced to the family, and so that we can do a formal introduction. So I can be introduced to our family, but I got there. She did a lot of things. So in my way, Bonobo, I didn't send her all of that. I just wanted to do it as simple as possible, as small as possible. But she eventually went to do. So I got there. So me not come be like say. So because a lot of persons have been calling me and say I do marriage, I don't let them know that they have to travel down. And so they say miss my marriage. They have to come for the marriage. Not be marriage. I do an introduction. So but. Will give ample time because of my fans and my followers who would like to be part of a traditional wedding and the reception. So we will make it. We'll give up to 4 months notification so that those who wishes to come can have ample time to make preparation to attend, because that's what I've eventually reached out to. These people were quite not happy that Yahweh marriage, I marriage you introduction. Anyway, so I will be introducing everybody. Yeah, she's a Benin she's a Benin descendant. So more or less she's Benin. If what we've been advocating for all these wise by looking for all of the Benin descendants all over the world and all of that, that makes her Benin. She's a Sako. She's a Sako, both paternally and maternally. From her father and her mother are both a Sako. Only that they have lived all their lives in Ilefe. That's I schooled in Ilefe, so I've met her quite many years ago. So she's a Sako, and for those who want to know, she's currently her Edo language has improved. Like I said, I'm not an Edo man that says things I won't do it. I've made it very clear to her that I don't have any children that I wishes to communicate with in English language. So she's been enrolled in an Edo language class. She more or less she's learning very fast, and I think she practically communicated with friends and family with Edo language yesterday and day before yesterday. So she's learning the language very fast. Like I've did series of class that the Benin men have failed in the duty to colonize their wives. So like I said, over here don't know any baby. So I will not say things on a live video and go and do something contrary. I will not say things on the live video and go and say something contrary. Alright, so she's learning the language very fast, because I told her that if she doesn't learn that language, there wouldn't be any marriage. So I know the kind of Edo person that I am. I know everything about me has to be a role model to every Edo sons out there. So I have to do some certain things, not for public pleasing, but because that is my principle and that's what I want a lot of Edo persons to learn. Marrying a Yoruba, marrying an Igbo has never always been a problem. People, they are basically intermarriages. But being as a Edo man, you must ensure that your wife and your kids learn your language, because if an Igbo man marries an Edo woman and Edo woman starts speaking Igbo in the shortest period of time, the same thing with Yoruba. So why are we not colonizing our wives, even if invariably they are not Edo women? Alright? So so invariably, so they must. It's not I am in Adwaje no Dwata. She follows all my life programs. She knows all my activities. She knows how drawn I am to my very being. She knows how drawn I am to the culture. She's Muslim. She's not Christian, she's Muslim. But we've had to deal with traditional issues, that I'm a traditional man. I believe the ways and the ancestors. Do you accept me for being me? Why accept I'm religiously tolerant? One of the most epic videos or interview that I've ever conducted was with Nebo TV, and it was about Oba Orogboa. That's one of my best interview. In there, I explained why Oba Orogboa is my favorite Oba of all the Obas of Benin. Respect to the great Ewais, the great Ozolwa, the great Esigi. Respect to Giso Odolige. Respect to Giso A. But my favorite is Oba Orogboa. And one of the key reasons I've always modeled my life towards Oba Orogboa's ideology was because of he was religiously tolerant. He was religiously tolerant. He was a Christian king, but he was a Christian king, he loved his tradition. And he was tolerant to whatever religion that was on the land. So that's why one of the reasons, aside several other reasons, but that's why Oba Orogboa is my favorite Oba. So let's put that one aside and let's talk about what I wanted to talk about. Basically, it's let's look at Benin historical evolution. How there are some certain things that I've heard. Some of you who have been following me, I've had to give examples that the comparison between Benin and the Europeans, there are no basis for comparisons, because we evolved based on our God-given idealism. We didn't need the Europeans to tell us how to deal with some issues of our kingdom, of our empire. There were some certain things that were done in Benin that were not right. But we didn't need the Europeans to tell us that what you are doing now is wrong. After some certain events of life, we started to realize that these policies, these ideas are not favorable. These ideas will not promote the growth of the kingdom. Will not promote the growth of the kingdom. Alright? So the Benins had to evolve basically on their own accord. The Benin had to evolve by their own selves. They didn't need anybody to tell them this is what you would need to do. So as a dynamic society, foreign ideas that were inimical to the growth, the overall growth of the Benin society was imbibed. and those that were sort of destitute were carted away with. So we wishes to use Iyoba as a case study. Now, the story that is out there is that why wars was a practice of killing the Oba's mother before the son can ascend to throne barbaric. This is the first question I want to pose. Was the practice of killing Oba's mother barbaric before the ascension of his son? Now, we must understand this. At one point in time in history, the Benins had the Oba and the mother. But over time, the mothers of these Obas became too powerful. They became too powerful. The mothers of each of these Obas of Benin became too powerful that they were not deciding the details, the future of the kingdom, or what will eventually become the empire. So, along the line, Edo came together and said that they can no longer serve a king and also serve the king's mother. Iyoba. At that time, Iyoba, the word Iyoba as a title, the word Iyoba was just a word, was not a title, has not been instituted. So we cannot be serving the king and serving the king's mother. So at one point in the Benins were comfortable serving the Oba and serving the Oba's mother. But the society grew over the years that the Benins were no longer comfortable serving two kings, one in the form of the real king and one in the form of the mother. So the Benins were no longer comfortable with that arrangement. Instead, the elders met and said that instead of we having to serve two kings, on the accession of the son, the mother must be put to death. Understand this. There was a reason, there was a matter that gave birth to the Iyoba, or the Oba's mother being killed. There was a reason that gave birth to it. There was a reason that gave birth to it, that because they were no longer convenient. Before then, they were comfortable with it, but at one point in time, they feel that having both the mother and the Oba became destructive, was no longer favorable to the growth of the Benin society. The Europeans did not come to tell us that you should not longer be having the Oba and the Oba. Even in the Roman Empire, they also practiced some aspect. The old Roman Empire also practiced some aspect of Benin history. For example, one of the most influential figure on the accession of the king must be put to death. It is a common knowledge that the God Almighty has bestowed upon every human something I always refer to, sort of an ideological coincidence, that people think almost the same idea at the same time, different time on the faces of the world. It's how we can be able to exploit intuitively our minds. Alright, intuitively our minds. So I think that's what transpired. So all the growth, the transactions of our growth was based on how it was reverent on our society. And that's how the Benin people constituted ideas that were in tandem to the growth of the society. So when it dawned on the Benin people that it was no longer convenient for the Oba of Benin and his mother to be alive at the same time, then I said, okay, let's make do with that one, so that we have to concentrate on one. We don't have to serve two masters anymore. Let's have one master. So I want to call that practice barbaric. That is the point. I want to call that practice barbaric because it was an essentiality at that time of history. At that time of history. If you bring any evil into the political world, I don't think nobody wants his deputy to be as powerful. I don't think the constitution will want the vice president to be as powerful as the president, or the mother of the president to have equal power with the president. So, but when it gets to a point where the mother of the president is as powerful as the president, we'll have to make do with that one so that we can only have one true president. I think that's a precedent that the Benin people observed. They could no longer envisage having to serve two powerful people, one the Oba and the other the mother. So then I put a law that before any Oba ascends the throne, the mother must be killed. It was not always the law of the land. At one point in time, they were the Oba and the mother were both alive at the time of the ascension of the Oba. But it became very clear to the Edo people that we can no longer serve these two powerful people. So a law was enacted that on the ascension to the throne, the mother must be put to death. And the point I'm trying to derive it is that let nobody tell anybody that that part of our history is barbaric. It wasn't barbaric, it was a reason, and that's the reason that I've stated forthwith. Alright? The reason was a clear, it was a good reason. It was at that time, it was a righteous reason for the land. It was good, it was righteous for the land. Alright? It was a very good reason for the land. So there wasn't anything barbaric. So I'm trying to tell, I'm going to be speaking on some aspect of our history where the Europeans or our neighbors were saying that it was barbaric and all of that. So I'm going to be saying that the Benin society evolved by the evolution of their ideas at that particular point in time. Alright, at that very particular point in time. So it was no longer a constructive idea to have both the mother and the son. It was becoming destructive. So in order for we to have one true leader that will listen to the voice of the people rather than the voice of the mother, and thereby the mother controlling the child, and the child it's not like how do I put it? It's not like more of like a representative, not really the true king, because there's one powerful person behind the child that instruct the child on the decision the child makes. Even if we call the person the Oba always have a requisite sort of what's it called? Requisite sort of will always listen, hearken to the voice of the mother. So the Benins could not go through all of those processes, so they have to make do with that one. At that time, the bottom line is they didn't want sort of what my brother just called mommy's boy. They didn't want to be serving a mommy's boy. They wanted a king that is true, that takes decision based on his findings, based on his conviction. So they needed to put that law, and that law itself is not barbaric. So all through some reigns of the kings, I don't have the profiling, I don't have the research. I don't think probably those names could have eluded our history, that which of the Oba put the law that at what reign of the Oba was that law put, or the reign of the Ogiso, that once his sons ascend the throne, it must be put to death. Whether that law was from Ogiso eras and all of that, I don't know. I don't have details of that. I have never read it anywhere in a book. Some of these things are intuitive history. there has to be a reason why the Oba's mothers were being killed. And the reason is what I have aligned. So eventually, it went on for some time. Maybe a few years, a lot of years, or for some centuries. Then it got to the turn of a woman called Idia. It got to the turn of a woman called Idia. Now, understand this. Prince Osawe had no reason by ancestral precepts to ever become the Oba of Benin. I am putting it very straight. Prince Osawe, with all the odds on ground, couldn't have been the Oba of Benin. Couldn't. First, the mother was not even the first 2 wives or first 3 wives. Secondly, the first wife of Izoduwa was already pregnant. More than a year before Idia was even married. But there's some certain part of that history that has eluded. You understand? That is why Idia was, I wouldn't call her a witch, which is demeaning. She was a powerful sorceress. But she had one agenda. The agenda was that she will give birth to the heir apparent. I don't want to give details of that history today. She will give birth. That's what, when she was married, the first thing she said, so that is, she will give birth to the next Oba. She was a powerful sorceress. So, Aaron becoming a very powerful person could have been because maybe he was overdeveloped in the womb of the mother, because Idia, for whatever reason, some history that has eluded that we don't really speak about, had to hold the pregnancy of Queen Amowie for years until she was pregnant. She confirmed with her past that the child she was pregnant with was a male. Then until she had the pregnancy of Queen Amowie for a few years, until she could no longer hold it. So, few hours interval, Lady Amowie, who was supposed to be due to have given birth 2 years earlier or 3 years earlier, gave birth few hours before she gave birth, and thereby now created a scenario. In other words, outside what we know as a typical Benin history, that they were born, Iyoba was few hours older. She wouldn't, even if Iyoba was days older, with who she was, it was all odds were against Iyoba to even to have won, to have been the Oba, because Osawe had a powerful mother, an extremely powerful mother, and the mother stood for him and made him the king that the world now speaks so highly of. So, if Isee was a Christian king, because there was a particular journal I read that Isee was not the first Christian convert in Benin. It was actually Idia. Queen Idia was actually the first Christian convert in Benin. She had already converted to become a Christian a couple of months before her son. She was even the one that convinced her son to be a Christian eventually. Because I didn't know how the Europeans could have convinced her to be a Christian, but her face mask had 11 bishops with, is it cassock? in a bishop in. So they all had it. So what is very true was Queen Idia became a Christian convert at a later part, which had influenced our own son by Isee to become a Christian convert. But I don't want to give details. I don't want to give details of all of these, some of these histories that are not in the public domain. I don't want to give details of them. But what I want to inherently say, the point I want to exact is that Queen Idia had protected the young Osawe even before he was conceived, even before he was born. So she has determined the future of her child long before Osawe was born. So she has determined that her son must become the Oba of Benin, as a matter of fact. And with the powers that she has, or that she had, she was able to maneuver, command the forces of the day and the forces of the night to be in favor of her in a way that she was able to pull through until her child became the Oba of Benin. She didn't stop there. There became a grand conspiracy against the child. If there was no Queen Idia, Oba Isee would have certainly have been deposed, because Oleya told him that he was going to deal with him. If there was no Queen Idia, Oba Isee wouldn't have even spent up to 5 years on the throne. She had the protection of the mother. But this is what was striking. A child who has had this so much love from a child who has so much love from the mother, interest has to also be protected. Interest has to also be protected. All right. A child who has so much love, a child who has so much love for the, a child who has so much love for the mother, interest has to be protected. So when a time came when the Benin wanted to do the age-long tradition of having to kill the mother, he rose up and said that you cannot kill my mother. He protected the mother with everything he got. There are a lot of history behind that came to say, the old streets, Amowie, and all of that. I think we'll talk about all of that. We'll talk about all of that much later. We'll talk about much later, or some in other subsequent class, because there's a point I want to derive in all of this. So eventually, the son had to present, not authoritatively now, had to present, because this is a matter of the laws of the land. The law of the land states that when you ascend the throne, your mother before you ascend the throne, your mother has to be killed before you ascend the throne. Now the mother has helped him so much all throughout his life, and the mother has been able to take him to the level of being installed or being coronated as the Oba of Benin. Now the Edo law states that the mother has to be killed. Now Isee needed to protect the his own interest of saving his mother. So he did everything he possibly can, but eventually the Benin, the Edo people still found out, and they captured the mother to be executed. But now he presented an argument. The argument that he presented was that he presented an argument. The argument that he presented was this. Iyoba. I did not make myself the Oba of Benin. I became the Oba by the verdict of God and our ancestors. It is not my decision that I wanted to become an Oba. It is the decision, well, we can also add the decision of God, ancestors, and in this case, Queen Idia. Because without Queen Idia, it wouldn't have been possible, like I have said it, that Prince Osawo would have been crowned as the Oba. Alright? Wouldn't have been crowned as the Oba. So he presented the argument that he didn't ascribe the title of becoming an Oba to himself. So why should my mother be killed? It is not my fault. It is not my fault. Rather, it is the fault of the law. So if you are to kill my mother by the level of the law of primogeniture from father to son, then I am not the only one who is convented with that law. Olia is convented with the law. Edon is convented with the law. And these elders, these that we now call Uzama Niyon, 6 of them, are convented with the law, the same law of primogeniture. So if I have to sacrifice my own mother, each of these hereditary titles will have to sacrifice their mothers on their ancestration or when they are being installed to their titles. That was an argument that he presented. So after several deliberations, one thing, the Benins run a sort of a monarchical system that was not autocratic. I've always said it, that people give this wrong notion that even there were checks and balances even to the authority of the Oba of Benin in the old. Let's get some very facts very clearly. Alright? So the Oba of Benin wasn't taking a sole decision. There have never always been a time that the Oba of Benin take a sole decisions. The sort of historical misconstruction that a lot of people has made over the years that the word of the Oba is final. But before words of the Oba are made to be final, it is on the consultation of his elders or chiefs. So that's why he has elders, he has ministers, some word you now call ministers, like the chiefs. Alright, and there were checks and balances too. One of the checks and balances is, if Oba gives you a title, it is only death that can take your title. So if Oba gives me Izoduwa title and I misbehave tomorrow, the Oba of Benin cannot take that title from me. But he can only suspend me. Alright, the title is still with me. It's still with me, it's my title. Because he has already given the title to me. Alright, I will still be addressed as that, but I can no longer. Suspension means that I can no longer function with I no longer have the capability to function as a holder of the title, but the title cannot be given to another person until I can no longer function. I don't have the capacity to function as a holder of that title, but that title cannot be given to someone else until I die. These are some of the checks and balances that the system created, so that even as powerful of the Obas, they don't overdo some certain things. All right. So, like I said, okay, so eventually these deliberations were made, very democratic. The power of the Oba of Benin has not been always so decided or autocratic. So Oba will have to have interaction with his chiefs, his elders, and if it's through these interactions, should he not take decisions, which is right. It's only God that knoweth everything. Even the Oba does not know everything, so he will need to seek counsel from his. He will need to seek wise counsels from his chiefs and his elders in order to take some certain decisions, some certain case. All right, should he be very insistent on a particular issue, it usually will come to pass if he's insistent, but most times he seeks for opinions from his ministers, and that's why the Oba of Benin do not sit alone to take decisions of the kingdom. He sits with his chiefs. They collectively take decisions in the running of the day. Like I've said, these are some of the checks and balances. Eventually, this matter was deliberated. It was not like Oba Isee said, from today henceforth, my mother will not be killed. No, that's not how that matter was presented. How the matter was presented was, if you have to kill my mother, we'll have to kill your mother's too. But if you spare mine, we'll also spare yours. And the others went home, had the sober reflections. We have already had some skulls of some chiefs, had a sober reflection of the argument that Oba Isee has presented. And they had a rethink. And they now said, okay, we will allow your mother live, only if he does not stay in Benin with you. Agakwe ni juaro, but agi oni juare do. Find a place for her to stay that is far away from Benin, from where you are. Then make her a chief in her own right, to be able, she still has power, but her power should not be limited within one locality and not within the extent of the entire kingdom like they used to possess in the time of the old. And she agreed. And instead, a chieftaincy title was agreed to be bestowed on her, and that chieftaincy title is called Iyoba. One unique thing about the Iyoba, I was just thinking the other time, sometimes when you think, Iyoba chieftaincy title is the only chieftaincy title in Benin Kingdom that can be given posthumously. So, that is very unique. That is very unique. It makes that chieftaincy title one of the most unique chieftaincy title in Benin. I was just thinking, is there any other chieftaincy title given posthumously? No. So, the chieftaincy title of the Iyoba is the only chieftaincy title in Benin Kingdom that is given posthumously. So, the chieftaincy title can be given even with the demise of the Queen Mother. It was only the Queen Mother. You must understand this thing. When you say the Queen Mother, there is a difference between Iyoba. I think I've explained it. You should know. There's a difference between Iyoba and Esonerie. There are two Esono. There's an Eson as a title, and there's an Esonerie as a. Esonerie is Oba's first wife. Esonerie is Oba's first wife. But sometimes Esoneries are not Iyoba. Sometimes Esoneries are not Iyoba. That is what it means, is that Oba's first wife automatically is given the title of Esonerie. Oba Benin's first wife is Esonerie. Now, but sometimes not Oba's first wife is not the one that will give birth to Oba's first son. So there are discrepancies. People should understand that the Iyoba is a more powerful, way more powerful title than Oba's first wife. Way more powerful. It's way more powerful. It's just like comparing the First Lady, which is not even constitutionally, it's not constitutionally recognized, and the office of the Chief Justice of the Federation. So the Iyoba title is it's acquitted as the Chief Justice of the Federation, for example. I'm just giving you, or the Senate President. Why the Esonerie title is equated to the President's wife. Alright? So it was only the queen mother that was subjected because it's the queen mother that has power. Although there were some Oba's first wives that had power, like Isee, Ogisowodo's what's it called? Ogisowodo's wife, Isee. Alright? So no. Oba's first wife title. Isonere is not a title. And a title na munoma. Oba's first wife is called Isonere. It's more of like their nickname. A title is not bestowed on them. It is what they are called. It is not bestowed on them. It is what they are called. Alright. Isonere means Oba's first wife. Alright. So let's get that one clear. It's not a title. It's what they are called. In the old, they were originally called a nahe. In the old, Oba's first wife were originally called a nahe. Eneahen. A nahe. Our Oba's first wives. I do not dispute of you. They had titles for about 3 or 4 of the wife. I'm saying naturally, how do I explain it so that you understand? It's just like the incoming Oba is called the Daiken. Is not okay. The incoming Oba, the first son of the Oba of Benin is called Oko Nohwa. That's not a title. Every first son of the Oba is called Oko Nohwa. It's not a title. When by time is instituted into some colleges of some initiated in some cult groups, it now been bestowed with the title of a Daiken. A Daiken is a title, but being Oko Nohwa means being the first son of the Oba of Benin. That's the same thing with Isonere. Being the first wife of the Oba of Benin makes them call you Isonere. But the original name was called a Nahe. Was called a Nahem. Because I'm able to remember, because this story was actually told. This story I remember. Dr. Isee Ihagosa of blessed memory told me this story, that there used to be a Olokwe Nahem. Olokwe Nahem at the present entrance of prison at Tiltle Road. There was a big Uloko tree there. He said the Uloko tree was there in the 70s. Ulokwe Nahen, that it was the building that near with Fort Martina, that when they were about to start constructing the building, that was when they Lokoni, that he was not, the way he told me the story was that he was not conversant with Benin history. Otherwise, he would have done everything humanly possible to ensure that Amafi Rani, it was called Ulu. That's where he now told me that the Oba's first wives at the time of old were called a Nahen. So, a Nahen. So these were the argument that Isee presented. After he presented it, the others went, they looked at it, and they saw reasons with him. And then I said, okay, fine. Tell your darling mother that she should no longer cross the Iyakma and enter Benin. The moment you become an Oba, you must install your mother as an Iyoba, a chieftaincy title, and you will relocate her to Selu, and she will be domiciled there till her dying days, or till she dies. Before now, where you now call Benin City, Benin, the administrative headquarters was divided into 3. You can get Benin City, or the administrative empire of the then Benin Empire were divided into three. There were three quarters. They were coalized three quarters that makes up of the old Benin. Awe ahata ogbe on its own ohwa. All right. Even in the ogbe, you now have caskets of ogbe agidi, ogbe nagidi, ogbe ibuya. Those were classified as ogbe. Then you now have Oyenohwa. Now, the Sokmomba Road divides Oyenohwa from Ogbe. All right, if you are entering Sokmomba Road from Ring Road, all the right hand side were classified as Ogbe. So in other words, if you are going through the old map or the old history of Benin from Baptist, Ogbelaka, they were all in Ogbe, but that's why Ogbelaka is at your right hand side of Sokmomba Road. They were all classified as Ogbe. Then the left hand side down to wherever, to Iundu and all of that, to Ibobayo, Origbeni, were classified as Oyenohwa. So Sokmomba is an old road, very old, one of the oldest roads in those in Benin. So Sokmomba Road divided Oyenohwa from Ogbe. Now, then towards the western part of Benin, you now have Uselu, Oyenohwa, Uselu, Ogbe, Oyenohwa, Uselu. So Uselu became a quarter, a town of its own. Let me not use a quarter now. Let's be more realistic. It was more of like a town of its own, now presided over by Iyoba. Now, this is where it's tricky. Now, at the time of Iyoba, the Daken title has already been constituted. At the time of Iyoba, the Daken quarter has already been constituted. Abi? Has just newly been constituted, not up to 50 years that the Uselu quarters were already constituted. So, so that is why Uselu was further now splitted to Upper Uselu and Lower Uselu. The Upper Uselu now, it's where the Iyoba domains is. Then the Lower Uselu, alright, is where the Daken is stationed. So even Uselu now have upper, that is when we call it upper, towards Benin City, closer to Benin City, was where Iyoba was domiciled. Then farther from Benin City is called the Lower Uselu, where Daken was domiciled. So we Agba Owodo, so that you don't have any affairs on what to do here, so that you don't have anything, any issue or whatever for you to conduct here. That was the internal agreement, and that agreement has still to date. But my point in all of this, which is very foundational, is that it didn't take the Europeans to tell us what is right and what is wrong. The grooming or the growing of the kingdom requires some decisions that were later found to be wrong, to have been unjust. But the system itself, being a dynamic system, understood that some of its policies, some of its ideas were unjust and were inimical. No, were hampering the growth of the kingdom. So they had to do away with some of these policies. Some of these policies were lost in time as part of the historical evolution of our people, because we self-identified those ideas that were wrong. We removed them from our culture. Then those that were right, we took them as being part of our culture. That shows that the Benin society over the years has always been dynamic in terms of their traditions and in terms of their culture. So if, like has been alleged, that there were human sacrifices in the old, which human sacrifices were practiced all over Europe, were practiced in all parts of the world, but also such practices might have been part of our practices in the old. But it didn't take the Europeans to tell us that human practices or human sacrifices were wrong. The Benin themselves understood the evolution of their culture and the tradition, and they were able to make do without these human sacrifices. So that is the point. So the Benins over the years have been able to have ideas. They were able to come up with ideas that they were able to create a counter policies, most especially to the policies that were unjust, were unfair, and that were wrong to the people. It is self-growth. We've seen it all. We grow through the system, and just like gold passes through the fire, the Benin people passed through different stages of civilization, and they were able to refine, take out the debris, and were able to sustain the content of the core value of the system, and taking out the bad part of it, extracting them until they were able to come up with the finest breed of administrative ideas and prowess. And that has put us in the position that we were until we were unjustly cut off by the British in 1897. So we were climaxing, we were at the Eldorado of perfection, because I have told them that administratively we also passed through processes of refining. All right, we first of all practiced primogenation. Then after some years we switched to gerontocracy, and after a lot of years we discovered that gerontocracy was not the best form of administration of government. We went back to primogeniture. Then after going into primogeniture, we practice a republican government. But we discovered that Republican government is going to ensure civil war. Then we went back again to primogeniture. After we were in the primogeniture, we enter a Republican scenario again. We came out of the Republican, we went back to primogeniture. Then after that, we went back to ruling houses system, where 6 ruling houses were set up, where each ruling houses will produce a king. They were all descendants of Eweka, but we created a ruling house. About 6 ruling houses were created, like the one that we've been practiced in Saudi Arabia, the kind of a ruling house that is practiced in some places in Northern America, like Morocco. It's practiced in Ife, it's practiced in Oyo. We also have our own ruling house. So Ewakbe was able to also negotiate himself from that scenario of the ruling house, and we went back to primogeniture, and that's what we have been practicing till now. So we've passed through glitches, we've passed through a lot of problems that has to do with government. We've been able to come out, and we discovered that the best form of government is primogeniture, because if it was not the best, we wouldn't have retained it. Though it is the best form of government, but it is inherently not perfect. It is inherently not perfect. There were some people who were still able to meander their way through the system, and were able to get what they wanted without inherently obeying the law of a father to first surviving son. There was a case that Obayewedo had an elder brother. Ogwola actually gave birth to Efabo. Efabo became Obayewedo. He was not born in Benin. He was born in somewhere in present Ondo area. he had an elder brother. The elder brother went to war, but he did not return. Then when the Benin's waited for him to return, he did not return. Then eventually, Efabo was retrieved. I was not crowned as Obaewedo. After he was crowned, shortly his elder brother came. So like I said, there were instances where even the elder sons of the Obas of Benin were not crowned as the Oba. Like I just gave a very good example. It was not the fault of the Benin people. It was because there were no instruments to check whether the son, he went to war, he never returned, and Efabo came and he was coronated as the Oba of Benin. So like what it says, it's not, there is no type of government that is perfect. But over the years, the Benin's discovered that primogenation was the closest form of government that is close to perfection. So it reduces brother to brother fighting. It reduces hiccups that has to do with the throne. All right, the Benins can easily tell who becomes the next Oba, becomes the next two Oba. There are no hiccups. You don't bring constitution to decide on that. So this is what over the years we've perfected. So in conclusion, none of our ideas have been barbaric. No policies that were created by the Edo people over the years was barbaric. It took time as our society began to grow, as there were more evolution of our civilization. We now begin to have a self-consciousness to realize that some of the policies or some of the laws of the land were no longer favorable to the people. We're sort of limiting the progress of the land. We're sort of constituting differences between same people, creating division between the same people. So we started to fizzle out she was over the years. Let me see what my brother wrote. My great grandmother has a family sister was Ehi to one of the brothers. She was forbidden to give birth. She was the only one not protected. It's true. Well, like I said, no Sadeba Samse, like I said, it's not barbaric tradition. It was not barbaric tradition. There might have been a reason why some of those laws were put in place. I think this is one of the reasons I wanted to take this class, because we begin to see it as barbaric. On what ground do we think it's barbaric? Alright, on what ground do we think Benin is barbaric? On what ground do we think the Benin is barbaric? Alright, on what ground do we think it was barbaric? It was a practice at that time that could have, if we dig deep now, if I'm to make research about it, I should be able to explain why such practices took place. There might have been reasons, but over the years, when they now discovered that the reason that they thought was good enough is no longer good enough, they put off those reasons. No. We never practice idolatry. I think that's where you have to have a steep. That's where you have to have a cleansing, that emancipation of the mindset. Who told you that what you practice was idolatry? Who told you? If men looking at you now, I will say that you are a Christian, and that is why you have the locus standing to judge your tradition. That is, the white man has detected to you a mindset that has now zeroed your mind, that makes you feel that the practices that your people had is idolatry. There are no such words in our orthography. The word idolatry is not such word. It doesn't exist as a statement. If I ask you now, Veduate idolatry, you will not be able to tell me. It is a formative languages that was formed post-colonial eras. It is not part of us. So it is because you already have a precept of a European mindset that you think the practices that your ancestors practiced were idolatry. No. Everyone has a reason. The reason I'm taking this topic is that I wanted our people to have a clear conscience that there were no basis. What was the basis? The Europeans came and raped our women, raped our mothers, killed our people, deposed our king. Have you, these were the same Europeans that brought Christianity. Have you, by any instance, faulted their ways of life as being barbaric and idolatry? You haven't faulted them because they have given you a pre-mindset that all that your people practice, or some of the practices of your people, were idolatry because they believed in their own ways. If I bring Ogun and all of these, Ayon, and I start to serve it, it is my way of my life. It is my way of life. You have no looker standing to tell me that you probably, if there were some, what I don't get engaged with, what I don't get engaged with is Christian conversations. If a pro-traditional personality comes in, it will say that Jesus Christ is a fictional character, that Jesus Christ never existed in the Bible. As a matter of fact, I don't get involved in such talk, whether Jesus Christ exists or not. It is not whether it exists or not. It is not my cup of tea. But what I do know was that the ways of my ancestors were right and just. Some that were not just, they themselves readjusted their mind. We never needed the Europeans. In short, all that we have become this time around is because the Europeans has mitigated our ways of life. Our spiritual understanding has come in between. It's a copycat. The major reason Africans are not growing is because we try to imitate the Europeans. The growth, Africans' greatest growth were when we were independent from a European ideology. So we are thinking it's like missing water. A common chemistry will tell you that a polar and a non-polar solvent, water cannot mix with oil because one is a polar solvent and the other one is non-polar. They cannot mix. So I think that's what is happening in the growth curve of the Africans. Our ideas are being polarized. Our polar minds are being polarized with the non-polar minds. So we have not been able to walk on the path that we have been, God created us to walk with. So it is hampering our growth because we are neither here nor there. We are partly African and partly European. Partly African by birth, European by thought. Partly European, partly African by birth and partly European by thought. And that's why we stopped growing. It was not, like I said, the Europeans, there were human sacrifices in Europe. Burning of witches in broad daylight. The Europeans were burning witches, but in Benin we were not burning witches. Have you read? There are some certain things I might not tell you now because do you know the code and conduct of Ekonore? If I begin to tell you things, if I begin to tell you so many secrets about Benin, you'll be astonished how we have grown. We went up and the Europeans people brought us down. At the time the Europeans were burning witches in Europe in broad daylight, the Benin's founded an institution, a system called a Konorwe. They understand there were good witches and there were bad witches. So they founded an institution which we call a Konorwe. What the Konorwe does were to purge out. They knew a system that purges out bad witches. Or when I am aware, all that is bad of you as a witch were being purged out. We were not killing the witches and wizards in our land. Instead, we were purging them out. Why the Europeans were burning them? The Europeans that were burning witches that were in rapid human sacrifices, you don't refer to them as barbaric, but you call your people being barbaric. And that's why I even choose the topic, because of the mindset of our people has to change. They have to understand that every system had every society had a system that were not really favorable to the land, but at one point in time they changed it. And it is not in your place to use the spectacle of the Europeans to now visualize, because when you now begin to look at these things from the European perspective, even without understanding the European culture that uses, before them in Egypt, when some of those pharaohs were being buried, or some of the European kings were being buried, they were buried with thousands of people. And those were not tagged barbaric. You understand? So, I don't want, if we start to make comparison with what the Benin people achieved, I just give you one example why the Europeans were burning their witches in broad daylight. They were killing thousands of it. The Benins didn't burn their witches because they know that they had a system. I don't know the system behind that. I don't know the secret behind that system, but they developed a system, an institution called a Konorwe, where witches were being purged of their bad doings without being killed. It's just like what the pastors now call deliverance. What some of these churches now call deliverance. That someone who has a demonic spirit is being delivered. The Benins were conducting a sort of deliverance for their witches without killing them. That was the same time the Europeans were burning their witches, were killing people in mass for being accused of practicing the sorcery. The Benins developed a system that instead of killing the so-called witches and wizards, they were purging them. So, like I said, some of these practices were not favorable. I don't want to use the word barbaric. We're not favorable to the people, but time and event made the Benins have changes. So what I'm trying to say is that we didn't need the Europeans to teach us anything. Some of the things so that's why I gave examples of some practices we did in the old that were not really, I wouldn't say good, I wouldn't say bad. But at the time those practices were made, it was favorable to the people. But after some time, because of the dynamism in our culture and tradition, after some time, we realized that it wasn't favorable to the growth of our society. We make do without them. Instead, we created policies that were better. It's just like someone realizing that the step he or she has been taking for a while has not aided in the growth of his company or where the place he or she works, then begins to take a step back and do a retrospection. After doing retrospection, discover that okay, let's look at what has been making our company not grow. Okay, where some of the staffs are not competent enough. They are not. Some staffs do not believe in the goals and visions of this company. Okay, let's remove these people. Let's replace them with a better staffs that are dedicated, that buy, and eventually it comes in, and after looking at it, oh wow, this is so beautiful. This was how African society was developing. So, but when the Europeans came, they killed that trajectory pathways of growth. So the Africans now are the most confused people on planet Earth. They are neither here or there. Polar and non-polar minds. Oil and water. Having an African skin, but thinking like a European, using the European standard to want to develop African. It's just like sometimes when I look at some certain things that happens in Europe, like legalization of same-sex marriage. In the street of Africa, we're supposed to be burning these people. Because our culture do not agree with this. Even when some of our people are not trying to, lost African people, are not trying to imbibe that culture. That's not our culture. That is not part of our culture. So, let's get it. Let's get it clear. We're going to be having series of these topics so that we can begin to look at some of those things that we call barbaric. What could have been the reason why some of our ancestors practiced it, and why could have been the reason why they had to stop it? What were the things that were stopped before then? Maybe in our next class we'll talk about slavery. I think that's one of the most controversial topics that has ever been mentioned about Edo people or Benin people engaging in slavery and all of that. Did they engage in slavery? What could have been the reasons they did or they did not? What could have been reasons that they did not? Alright, there must be a reason why some certain people did some certain things. But I have explained in different forum that some powerful people in Benin really practice slavery. Let's not get it very clearly. I could have mentioned some names, some very powerful chiefs in the world in the days of Isee. Practice slavery. Know that. But the royalty, the Iyoba himself, never engaged in slavery. In short, it was one of the cardinal problems of some of the Iyobas with some powerful chiefs. Because the Iyobas that disagreed, any of the kings that disagreed with the king on the matter of slavery were unpopular Iyobas, were tagged as the enemy of the people. So we'll take a full class on that. We'll look at all of these things in our next class. So anyway, I thank all of you who have deemed it very fit to join, even if they weren't. We've not been very consistent with our class. I'm sorry, busy, and thank you for all the text messages for my introduction. I'm very happy with all of those. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the thank you messages. Thank you messages for all the good congratulatory messages for my introduction. So God so so I thank all of you. Anyway, I have to go now. So thank all of you. So I'll see you guys soon. Oba talk about it says we'll be having more time to discuss other issues. Probably our next topic we can do a topic on slavery, and then let's look at some of those conversation, most especially some Black Americans, Black Americans who said that our people engaged in slavery and all of that. So we can make that another topic, a very exciting topic. So I'll give notification so that we can have other people to join us. So what the term slave were simply war captives. The Benin never put big slave chains on them. So yeah, they were war captives, as a matter of fact. But as a matter of fact, again, those war captives were supposed to be used as laborers in some powerful chiefs' farms and all of that. But eventually, some of these chiefs saw a need to make more money by selling them off to some European traders. All right, but itself, the Iyoba never engaged in that practice because there is an ancient law that forbids the Iyoba to sell a slave. There is an ancient law that forbids the Iyoba to sell his slave. And at time wori doba anayeto mo ovien here. You know, there's an ancient law in the land that forbids the Iyoba to sell any slave. So anyway, we'll look at all of these things. So thank you very much. Liverpool wa be the level. Gbemenima no wa gbe ma na wa yi me top 4 wa ke ya wu. Wa the beat one Liverpool beat us today. They now will see top 4 again for their life.